The moment Muhammad Ali walked into the grand hall of King Faisal's palace, you could feel the air change. Gold chandeliers sparkled above, silk carpet stretched across the floor, and priceless artwork adorned every wall. It was the kind of place where most people would feel small, intimidated, or dazzled by wealth and power. But not Ali. He walked with calm confidence, his eyes steady, his presence commanding even without a word. The king, one of the richest men in the world at that time, had something extraordinary in mind. He waved his advisors forward and, with a smile, handed Ali a contract. It wasn't just any contract, it was $200 million. Yes, $200 million for a single exhibition fight. To put that into perspective, most athletes could spend multiple lifetimes and never see that much money. Most people would have dropped to their knees in gratitude, scrambling to sign. But Ali, he didn't even reach for the pen. He looked at the king, and something about his gaze made the room tense. There was a stillness, a quiet authority that said, "I am here on my own terms." The king, amused and a little puzzled, asked, "Do you know what this is?" $200 million. Think of what you could do. You could retire tomorrow and live like a king yourself. Ali's lips curved into a small, calm smile. He didn't respond immediately. He let the words sink in, let the grandeur of the room, the weight of the offer, and the eyes of every advisor and court official settle on him. Then, finally, he spoke. "No," he said. Just one word, but the effect was explosive. The room went silent. Whispers spread among the advisors. Some gasped. Some leaned forward, unsure if they had heard correctly. $200 million. And Ali said no. The audacity of it shocked everyone in the room. But here's the part that makes this moment legendary. Ali didn't say no out of arrogance or to make a scene. He said it because he believed in something far greater than money. Principles, respect, and integrity mattered more than the largest sum anyone could offer. And what he said next? It was a lesson that would echo far beyond the walls of that palace. It was a lesson the world would remember for decades. Before we move on, imagine this. If someone offered you $200 million right now, could you say no? Think about that. It was an unusually bright morning in the heart of Riyadh. The sun shimmered off the palace's marble floors, reflecting the golden glow of chandeliers that seemed to hang like constellations indoors. Outside, guards in crisp uniforms stood like statues, while luxury cars lined the entrance. Inside, the atmosphere was calm yet buzzing with expectation. A rare visitor had arrived, the one and only Muhammad Ali. Ali didn't enter like most celebrities or royalty might expect. No entourage of bodyguards, no flashy entrance, no fanfare. Just a man in simple attire, jeans, a modest jacket, and that calm, piercing gaze that made people pause. His presence alone commanded attention. He wasn't loud, he didn't need to be. The room seemed to recognize him before he even spoke. King Faisal, known for his wealth and influence, rose to greet him. There was a sparkle in his eye, a kind of confidence reserved for men who believed they had seen it all. He extended a hand warmly and gestured to his advisors to present the offer. Documents were placed neatly on a polished mahogany table. Ali approached slowly, his gaze steady. "Mr. Ali," the king said, voice smooth, almost playful, "I have something for you. Something very special." He smiled, as if he were presenting a gift that would change a man's life forever. $200 million. For a single fight. Imagine the impact, the glory, the power you could command. You could retire tomorrow and never worry about money again. Ali didn't reach for the contract. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he let his calmness fill the room. His eyes swept across the advisors and the king. "I see," he said quietly. His tone was polite, almost gentle, but there was an unmistakable firmness beneath it. The king leaned forward, intrigued. "Do you know what this is? $200 million. For you, for your family, for your legacy. Most men would kill to sign this. All I ask is for one fight." Ali's lips curved into a faint smile. He shook his head slightly. "I know what it is," he replied. "And I know what it isn't." The room went still. Whispers traveled among the king's advisors. Some exchanged confused glances. Others raised eyebrows. What could a man possibly value more than $200 million? Ali continued, his voice calm but firm. Money is only worth something if it doesn't compromise who you are. You can't put a price on dignity, on respect, on principles. That is not mine to sell. The king's smile faltered. A subtle tension filled the room. Ali wasn't being disrespectful. In fact, his tone was measured, almost gentle. But the message was clear. He would not be swayed by wealth, no matter how vast. Even in that moment of silence, Ali's presence spoke volumes. It wasn't just the fame or the athletic dominance. It was the courage to stand for what he believed in, the power to choose integrity over extravagance, and the quiet confidence that comes when you know exactly who you are. As Ali took a step back, the advisors looked at one another, realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. The king, a man who had seen the world and thought he had experienced every challenge, was learning a lesson he would never forget. Before we move forward, think about this. How often do we face choices where our principles and money collide? And more importantly, would we have the courage to do what Ali did? The room was heavy with silence. You could almost hear the heartbeat of every advisor, every servant, and even the king himself. Muhammad Ali had just refused $200 million, and no one in that glittering palace knew quite how to respond. It was as if the air itself had thickened. A wealthy monarch, accustomed to getting everything he wanted, had just been denied. And not denied in anger or haste, but in calm, unwavering principle. King Faisal, who had rarely met anyone capable of challenging him, studied Ali closely. The man before him wasn't just a world champion in the ring. He was something else entirely, a man who carried his convictions like armor, who valued honor over gold, integrity over indulgence, and respect over riches. The king leaned forward, trying to mask a flicker of doubt behind a polite smile. "Mr. Ali," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully, "this is more than money. This is history. You could secure your family's future for generations with this contract. You could retire a legend and never fight again. Why refuse?" Ali didn't answer immediately. He let the words hang in the air, feeling their weight, but not letting them dictate his response. Then, with his calm voice and that unmistakable charisma that had already won millions of hearts around the world, he spoke. "Because some things money can't buy, and some choices are bigger than wealth. I fight for honor. I fight for respect. I fight for people who can't fight for themselves. No amount of money changes that." The advisors murmured among themselves, unsure whether to laugh, gasp, or bow in shock. Some looked at the king with disbelief. After all, how could anyone turn down $200 million? Others were quietly impressed, sensing that this was more than a refusal. This was a lesson in courage, a quiet rebellion against the world's obsession with wealth. The king's expression shifted subtly. He had dealt with powerful politicians, cunning businessmen, and even heads of state, yet here stood a man whose power wasn't measured in money, influence, or titles, but in character. He paused, letting Ali's words sink in, realizing that this confrontation was no longer about an exhibition fight or a contract. It was about values, principles, and the essence of greatness. Ali continued, his eyes steady, his voice calm yet commanding. "Respect isn't something you can buy. True strength isn't measured by what you take, but by what you refuse. You can offer the world's riches, but you can't force a man to compromise his beliefs. I will never fight just for money. I will fight because it matters, because it makes a difference." A few of the younger advisors leaned in, their faces reflecting awe and confusion. They had studied Ali's fights, watched him dominate in the ring, but this was different. This was power without violence, influence without intimidation, and courage without fear. The room remained quiet, but the tension was palpable. The king, for the first time in many years, realized that money, prestige, and authority were meaningless if they could not command respect. He had offered Ali what most people would consider an unimaginable fortune, yet Ali's refusal had elevated him in a way no contract could. The advisors scribbled notes, whispering among themselves, "He's not just a fighter. He's a master of principle. He's untouchable." Ali leaned back slightly, allowing a small smile. It wasn't arrogance, it was serenity. The calm of a man who had faced countless battles, both in and out of the ring, and had never compromised who he was. "Money is a tool," he said quietly, "but it's not the measure of a man. Never let it be. If you forget that, no amount of gold will ever make you rich. The king exhaled, a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Here was a man who refused the largest offer he would ever receive, yet somehow, in that moment, became larger than anyone else in the room. The room had been filled with wealth and grandeur, yet Ali's simple, unshakable integrity now dominated the space. At that moment, the tension transformed into a lesson. Power without principle is hollow, influence without integrity is fleeting, and money without respect is meaningless. Ali had proven that one man, armed only with courage and conviction, could redefine the rules of the game. Before moving forward, think about this. How often do we let money dictate choices that compromise our values? And how often do we have the courage to stand firm, even when the world expects us to bend? Ali's answer was simple, but its impact was immeasurable. The silence in the room was almost unbearable. Muhammad Ali's calm refusal of $200 million had left everyone frozen in place. For a moment, it seemed as if the palace itself was holding its breath, waiting for someone, anyone, to break the tension. But no one could. Not the king, not the advisors, not the servants standing quietly in the back. Ali's presence had filled the room with something far heavier than wealth, principle, conviction, and quiet authority. King Faisal, for all his experience in dealing with the world's elite, was momentarily speechless. He had offered what most people would consider a fortune so vast that it could change generations of a family's life. And yet, here was Ali, calm, composed, and unwavering, refusing it outright. The words, "no" and "principle" seemed to echo in the marble halls, louder than any chandelier or golden embellishment. The king's advisors exchanged uneasy glances. Some shuffled papers nervously, as if the contract they had so carefully prepared could somehow erase Ali's defiance. Others whispered quietly to one another, "Who does this? Who refuses money like this?" One younger advisor, unable to contain his curiosity, finally spoke up, "Sire, is he serious?" The king leaned back in his chair, studying Ali's face. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in astonishment. He had seen confident men before, men who challenged him or tried to negotiate, but never anyone who stood so calmly against both him and the temptation of unimaginable wealth. He realized that Ali's refusal wasn't arrogance, it was a statement. A quiet, powerful declaration that some things are priceless, and money cannot replace respect, integrity, or self-respect. Ali, standing with that effortless grace that had once dominated boxing rings worldwide, simply smiled. Not a boastful smile, but one that carried the weight of experience, the wisdom of a man who had faced countless battles, both inside the ring and in life. He understood the impact of his words, but he did not revel in it. He did not need to. His calmness alone was enough to command the room. A hush fell over the palace. Servants paused mid-step, watching in awe. Courtiers held their breath. Even the guards at the entrance seemed to instinctively understand that something extraordinary was unfolding. The room, filled with gold, marble, and luxury, had suddenly shrunk in significance. All that mattered now was Ali and his unwavering principles. The king finally spoke again, his voice measured. "Mr. Ali, most men would take this offer without a second thought. They would see it as the opportunity of a lifetime. Yet here you stand, refusing. Why?" Ali's reply was calm, almost serene. "Because no amount of money can make a man who he is not. Respect, honor, dignity, these are things money cannot buy. I fight for truth, for justice, for the people who cannot fight for themselves. Money alone is meaningless if it compromises who I am." The advisors scribbled furiously, some thinking this was a lesson they would recount for years. Others just stared, speechless. They had witnessed a masterclass in integrity, not taught, not lectured, but lived and embodied in real time. A moment later, whispers began to ripple through the room like a gentle storm. "Did you see that? He really said no. $200 million, and he refused? I've never seen anyone do that before." Even the king, who had offered the money, felt a strange mixture of respect and disbelief. He had encountered boldness in politics and business, but nothing like this. Ali had turned a test of wealth into a lesson on character. Ali stepped back slightly, his eyes meeting the king's one last time. "Remember," he said quietly, "a man is not measured by the money he takes, but by the principles he keeps. Don't ever forget that. And with that, the atmosphere shifted. The tension remained, but it was no longer uncomfortable. It was awe. Everyone in the room, the king, the advisors, the servants, understood that they had just witnessed something extraordinary, a moment that would be remembered not for the money offered, but for the courage it was refused with. Before we move to the reveal, think about this. How often do we face choices that test our values? And more importantly, do we have the courage to stand firm, even when the world expects us to bend? Ali had just shown the answer, loud and clear, without shouting, without threats, without compromise. The palace was quiet, yet charged with a tension that only a moment of true principle could create. Muhammad Ali had just refused $200 million, and the effect was sinking in slowly, like ripples spreading across a still pond. The advisors whispered urgently among themselves, trying to reconcile what they had just witnessed. A man had just walked into the most opulent palace in the world, calmly looked the king in the eye, and turned down a fortune beyond imagination. King Faisal, usually composed and authoritative, now leaned back in his chair, processing. He had seen boldness before, even defiance, but never with such poise. This wasn't arrogance, it wasn't recklessness, it was principled courage. He realized that Ali wasn't just a fighter in the ring. He was a force in life, a man who commanded respect not through threats or wealth, but through unwavering conviction. Ali's calm gaze met the king's. "I came here for one reason," he said softly but firmly. "Not for money, not for fame. I came to stand for what I believe in. And that, no one can buy." The advisors shifted uncomfortably, feeling both awe and discomfort. Some were inspired, some confused, but all realized that this moment would not be forgotten. 4 years, they had studied strategy, wealth, power dynamics, yet here was a man who had rewritten all the rules in a single gesture. The king finally broke the silence. "Mr. Ali, you have shown courage that few possess. You have turned down something almost unimaginable. I must ask, are you certain? $200 million. It could change everything." Ali nodded. "I'm certain. Money has its place, but it does not define a man. I fight for respect, for truth, and for my people. That cannot be bought." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For the first time, the king seemed less like a monarch commanding from a throne, and more like a student learning from a master. He realized that wealth could never purchase integrity, nor could gold replace principles. Outside the palace doors, whispers of the event had begun to spread. Those who were present would recount it for decades. Some described Ali as untouchable, others as legendary, but all agreed on one truth. In that moment, he had become larger than life, not because of what he had or could take, but because of what he refused. Even among the advisors, the lesson was clear. One whispered to another, "This isn't just a man refusing money. He's showing us what it means to be truly powerful." Another nodded, muttering, $200 million, and he walked away. "That takes more strength than anything else I've seen." Ali turned slowly toward the door, his presence still commanding, his demeanor calm and assured. As he walked away, the room seemed to shrink in comparison to the magnitude of his character. The advisors, the king, even the servants, all felt the weight of what had just happened. This was more than a refusal of money. It was a declaration of values, a testament to courage, and a lesson in self-respect that could not be taught, only witnessed. In that moment, King Faisal rose and gestured to the advisors, speaking not as a monarch, but as someone who had just learned something extraordinary. "Remember this day. Money is powerful, yes, but it is meaningless without principle. Respect, integrity, and courage, these are the true measures of greatness." Ali's decision would echo far beyond the walls of that palace. Newspapers, advisors, and the world itself would recount this story for years. It wasn't just that a man refused $200 million. It was how he did it, with dignity, with calm, with unwavering commitment to what he believed in. He had shown the world that true wealth is not measured in dollars or gold, but in courage, principle, and respect. As Ali exited the palace, the room slowly came back to life, but nothing would ever be the same. The king and his advisors had witnessed a masterclass in character, a lesson that could not be bought or negotiated. It was a story that would inspire countless generations, a story of a man who refused the world's largest offer, not for defiance, but for the honor of standing true to himself. The silence in the palace lingered even after Muhammad Ali had turned away. The advisors whispered among themselves, still struggling to process what they had witnessed. Some paced the marble floors, unsure of how to react. Others simply stood in awe, realizing that history had just unfolded before their eyes. Ali's refusal of $200 million wasn't just a statement. It was a moment that would echo far beyond that gilded room. King Faisal, a man accustomed to commanding attention and respect, felt a mix of emotions. He was astonished, humbled, and quietly impressed. Here was a man who had walked into the grandest palace in the world, looked at unimaginable wealth, and turned it down with calm confidence. It was a kind of courage that money could never buy, a quiet power that few ever understood. The king rose from his chair, his advisors pausing mid-conversation. "Mr. Ali," he said, his voice measured but warm, "most men would have accepted this offer without hesitation. They would have taken the money, the glory, and the ease it brings. But you have chosen differently." Ali's expression remained calm, almost serene. "I fight for something larger than myself," he said quietly. "Money is fleeting. Fame is fleeting. But respect, integrity, and truth are eternal. I cannot compromise them, even for what many would call the greatest fortune in the world." The room seemed to grow heavier with the weight of his words. Every person present, the king, the advisors, the servants, felt the impact. Ali had done more than refuse a contract. He had taught a lesson in life. Some whispered quietly to each other, calling it a masterclass in courage, humility, and principle. One of the king's senior advisors approached cautiously. "Sire, he's right. What he has shown is more powerful than any wealth or title. His strength is not in his fists, but in his heart." The king nodded slowly, absorbing the truth in those words. Ali turned toward the door, ready to leave, but the king stopped him. "Wait," he said. "Before you go, know this, the world will remember this. Your courage today is greater than any fortune I could offer. You have set a standard that few can match." Ali smiled faintly. "That's the hope," he said. "That people will see that integrity matters more than money. That standing by your principles is worth more than any fortune." As he walked away, the room remained silent for a few moments, then slowly, whispers grew louder. Some advisors exchanged glances and nodded. Even the servants, who had watched quietly, felt inspired. A few were already recounting the story, realizing they had witnessed a lesson that could not be taught in schools or books, only lived. Outside the palace, news would spread quickly. Journalists, historians, and fans around the world would talk about how Muhammad Ali had refused $200 million not out of arrogance, but out of unwavering principle. It would become a story shared for generations, not because of the money he turned down, but because of the character he stood by. The king, alone for a moment, reflected on the encounter. "This man is greater than any wealth I possess," he thought. Not because of his fame, not because of his skill, but because of his courage, his clarity, and his integrity. That is the true measure of greatness. Ali had left the palace quietly, without fanfare or announcement, yet his presence remained. The advisors and courtiers would never forget the calm authority in his voice, the unwavering gaze, and the quiet power of a man who refused everything the world called valuable because he valued something far greater. His principles. As Muhammad Ali walked out of the palace that day, the echoes of his refusal lingered far longer than any doors, gold, or marble could contain. He had walked in as a boxer, a champion known worldwide for his skill in the ring. But he left as something even greater, a symbol of integrity, courage, and principle. The world had watched a man turn down $200 million, an amount that could change lives, even nations, and in doing so, he had taught a lesson no money could ever buy. Ali had shown that true power isn't measured by wealth, fame, or physical strength. It's measured by the choices we make, the principles we hold, and the respect we show, both to ourselves and to others. He proved that integrity cannot be bought, that honor cannot be sold, and that courage is not about confrontation, but about standing firm when everything around you tempts you to compromise. The king, his advisors, and everyone present would carry this lesson for the rest of their lives. They had witnessed firsthand what it means to choose principle over profit, respect over reward, and character over comfort. Ali didn't need to raise his voice or flex his fame. His calm, unwavering decision spoke louder than words ever could. It was a demonstration that sometimes the greatest victories are won without a fight. For viewers and fans around the world, this story offers a universal truth. Money can give temporary security, but it cannot define your worth. Fame can bring recognition, but it cannot guarantee respect. True greatness lies in knowing who you are, what you stand for, and refusing to compromise those values, no matter the temptation. Ali's refusal of the $200 million contract was more than a financial decision. It was a statement about life itself. And this isn't just a story about Muhammad Ali or King Faisal. It's about all of us. How often do we face choices that test our integrity? How often are we tempted to prioritize short-term gain over long-term values? Ali's example reminds us that the most important victories are internal, the moments when we act in alignment with our principles, even when the world pressures us to bend. So, what can we take from this story? First, respect is earned, not bought. Treat people with dignity, even when it seems inconsequential. Second, courage comes in quiet forms. It's not always in the spotlight. Sometimes it's simply saying no to what compromises your values. And third, principle is priceless. No fortune, fame, or favor can replace the strength of character built by staying true to yourself. If this story inspired you, take a moment to reflect. What would you refuse if it went against your values? Think about your choices, your principles, and the legacy you want to leave. Muhammad Ali didn't just fight in the ring. He fought for life, for respect, and for the courage to stand alone if necessary. And in doing so, he became a legend far beyond any championship belt. Type integrity in the comments if you believe that principle is worth more than money. Share where you're watching from. Every viewer who chooses courage over compromise is part of this legacy. And remember, the next time life offers you a choice between comfort and conviction, ask yourself, what would Muhammad Ali do? True power is silent. True respect is earned. And true greatness isn't measured in dollars, fame, or applause. It's measured by the moments when you stand firm for what's right, even when no one is watching. Muhammad Ali didn't just refuse $200 million. He reminded the world that honor, courage, and integrity are priceless. And that, perhaps, is the most powerful lesson of all.